it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. And we are zooming in and focusing in today on a great viewer question. And that is really, how do you make some headway? How do you get through the fog, the feeling of impending doom or despair or heaviness or weightiness that can tend to emerge, after a relationship with a malignant narcissist, a psychopath, someone who has really got you in their stronghold, their grip, someone who has really created a sort of dense thought pattern within you, which is not very clear, which is oftentimes very heavy in nature, and you can't really think clearly. You have stunted thoughts, you have stunted emotions, you have stunted behaviors. You're not really able to think very clearly and rise up. You feel a very heaviness after this, and that can be what we call emotional fog. And really, it's when you're not really feeling very good, and you might have chaotic racing thoughts, or you might just have a really heavy feeling of despair or doom, or most likely fear that's keeping you stuck. It's like emotional quicksand. It takes a lot of resistance to get through these feelings, and we call that the fog. And now, to understand why it is there, I think is crucial to helping come through that situation, that experience. It's really kind of coming through the feeling of denial, or really a lack of awareness of why you're feeling that way. And oftentimes it can be needing or requiring the tools to really unhinge and loosen that up. It's needing validation. It's needing to articulate and understand the dynamics that have occurred that have got you in that situation. And when you're in a relationship, whether it's with a narcissist, someone who you presume is a psychopath, whatever it is, there's been a tinge or an element of emotional manipulation that has caused you to feel less than wonderful. It's caused you to experience low self-esteem, lack of being able to experience joy and happiness or bliss, or just feeling like your life is on point, you're on purpose, you're living your passion. It's gotten in the way and it's interfered with that. This is showing you that you have experienced a degree of emotional manipulation or control in your life, and a control by another person, organization, or what have you, that has given you this feeling or experience of emotional fog, or weightiness, or heaviness, or a feeling of darkness that has created what we call the emotional fog in this relationship. And to burn that off, to really get through that and have that lift and have that go away, is to understand that those individuals or organizations who have created an undue control over you, several things is important to come to your awareness, I feel. Number one is realizing that those individuals who are narcissistic, psychopathic, however you want to label them, who have created this negative impact, this feeling where you have a trauma bond or a negative connection, essentially, that's rippling through your life. It's to realize that these individuals who have an insatiable need to control others, they have this desire out of fear. So it's not out of happiness or the desire to oftentimes empower you. There's often a need to control you out of fear, and out of fear of how others are behaving and how others would challenge them in their life, that they perhaps don't feel comfortable being questioned or having a discourse or dynamic back and forth. They're not open to that, so they tend to try to control others so that they will be the one in the boss position, the boss cow, the one with the alpha male, the alpha female, the one who has got the juice, the one who has got the talent, the one who's got the status, who's got the car, who's got the label. Whatever it is that they want to be superior over, they have an insatiable need to experience that. And so this is when we really get into toxic relationships, is when someone is not open or receptive to your input and really what I feel is your own personal expression of your own values, your voice, your own values. So in other words, they are blocking that with a shield. They are controlling you, kind of cutting people down at the kneecap, oftentimes through intimidation, and not allowing you to be and be yourself. There's a hypercritical, a hyper arousal, a hyper where they've overstimulated you either through a need to shut you down, or hyper stimulate, meaning they are always taking the higher road. They are always in the soapbox. They're always the one to calling the shots. In other words, you don't feel a sense of empowerment or control. You're just kind of going along with them. There's not a give and take. There's not what we call a level playing field. There's not that interaction. It is oftentimes a feeling. So we're talking really about really trying to pinpoint the feeling where you have felt that you've had to make yourself so small, oftentimes in their presence, or so meek, or so silent, that you can't speak up, you can't speak your truth, you can't feel what makes you happy, you can't live your life purpose because you're always trying to adapt and adjust to a core of dysfunction. And it is very difficult when you're trying to adapt and adjust to an individual, an organization, or a society that is at its core dysfunctional. And there was a great philosopher who made that statement, and I'm not quite sure who it was, but really it does take heed and take attention when you realize that there's a great dysfunction in an individual, a group, or a society when you're trying to adapt and adjust to a society that is at its core dysfunctional or unethical. So we see kind of what's proliferating in society today. Where there's organizations that are at their core deceptive. For example, if you look at the recent blow up that went with, I don't want to use the term, or exposure that went through the VW organization, I think it was in like 2016, 2017 is really where it really kind of bubbled up, where they, on their diesel vehicles that they had sold into the hundreds of thousands of these, that they were then promoted as this new clean diesel, where you could, have this economy efficiency in this vehicle, and it was a clean burning machine, and they had a lot of advertisement that went along with it. And I'm not bashing that organization, but I'm using this as kind of an analogy or a comparison that then, as the emissions test revealed, is that they had a suppression device of some sort that would deceive the testing device. They had software that had been built in that, in other words, it was testing as a clean running engine, but yet when it really got out on the road, it was emitting these horrific amounts of emissions that were damaging the environment, and people were duped and deceived. And they had I think a $1 billion lawsuit. They had to repurchase hundreds of thousands of vehicles. They had a recall, and there was a very devious mastermind at the helm of this, a number of executives. So what does this have to do with the fog? Interesting analogy when we actually look at the clear air. That just kind of came to me, the fog, and really how you're feeling. So in other words, what you have felt is a toxicity. It's where you have not been able to piece your own thoughts together. You've not been able to feel your way successfully. You're not feeling congruent. You're always trying to adapt and adjust to a suppression system where you've been oppressed. And this it's difficult for you to run clean, think clean, or feel pure, be in touch with your thoughts, your feelings, and feel okay with it, or know your life passion. And you're always having to get permission from a narcissist as if to be who you are, to be the real you. But see, that's where the juice is. That's where the clarity has to come through. It's getting rid of that suppression device, just like the VW brand, that there's a specific term to that device, and maybe those of you who are familiar with that, where it was like a deception device, where they had put this in the actual engineer. I mean, it was I guess it's really running rampant through Europe, and a lot of the high-end vehicle manufacturers were called to task on this, and they have to really adhere to the regulations. And I know that in California, they came down very hard on them, and they really did not let them off the hook easily. So it's to realize that when you have been in a relationship with someone who has had an undue negative or toxic influence on you, where it's caused you to feel emotionally hurt, emotionally scarred, they have a seething or quiet rage or anger, where they've controlled you through hostility or criticism, trying to be very highly insultory. You know what I'm talking about, those people who have been in relationships. And we're not here to label. Let's just say here is a general experience that this person has had too heavy a hand or too negative a hand in your relationship, your upbringing, your experience at your workplace, where you feel a sense of fog. You really do need to acknowledge that and validate it, and then burn it off with self-validation and saying, I matter, I exist, I am important, my feelings are important and meaningful to me, and what I place value to me is where I'm going to now direct my focus. I'm now going to uncover what I truly am interested in and what I have a passion for. And so it's very difficult, though. I understand how difficult it is for you. And it is my wish that every single day you feel more and more clear, you feel more and more a sense of brightness and vividness in your life, despite the fact that it is a long journey, but is to understand and ask yourself, if you were to, what do you do in your free time? What is it that, if you look back at your pictures of yourself when you were a youngster, if you could do anything that you wanted, what was it that you really enjoyed? In fact, if they didn't even have to pay you, what did you like to do? Did you like to ride your bike? Did you like to help people? Did you like to play a musical instrument? Was there something that you were drawn to or interested in? This is a good indicator of how to get back to your own personal empowerment and your own sense of clarity. And oftentimes, though, this is what you've been sheltered from or kept away from. And it is which is going to help to prove part of the answer, a solution to helping you move through the fog and arrive at your sense of personhood, your sense of humanity, what makes you you and unique, and to not feel apologetic and not feel doom and gloom by feeling a sense of peace or being contented or following your happiness, because oftentimes this is where you've been scolded. This is where the scar is. And to live your passion oftentimes would be to disappoint this person, would be to say, you do not have power over me. And that is a very difficult statement to make, especially when you perhaps had willingly had to give over your power to this person, either at this certain time in your life. They had to support you financially. They had to support you emotionally. They had to provide shelter. It was a must situation. You had to be in this relationship, or this is just where life had brought you. So oftentimes it's very difficult to make that pronouncement, you do not have control over me. I have control over myself, and that is beautiful. That is a beautiful thing, to have control and be liberated in my own feelings, my own direction. And I am carving out my direction in my life from here on moving forward. And it excites me. It thrills me. It thrills me to know that I'm cut loose from these shackles. And it is this which is my inalienable human right, and I'm going to embrace that. I'm going to nurture that. Even if it's a very embryonic experience, it's saying I am liberated in this awareness, and it's saying that every day in every way, I'm going to be feeling better and better. I'm going to be feeling okay. Those feelings of fogginess, of not being able to think clearly, that feeling of burden that's been waiting on me is going to lift. And I'm going to feel healthier, and I'm going to feel stronger. And that every day I'm getting a little better. And that with time and experience, you're building up your repertoire of higher vibrational emotions, which are based in clarity. And so oftentimes, though, it's difficult to embrace the clarity because it can be alarming, it can be overwhelming, and you can feel overstimulated. In other words, the answer to your question, well, what would you like to do in your free time, or what in your past, knowing what that was, what do you enjoy doing? Oftentimes that answer is filled in, or there's this person in that answer. In other words, I would spend time with this person, or this person helped me in my free time, or this person was my parent, or this person was my spouse. So in other words, I couldn't have experienced that without this person. So knowing that you are liberated as an individual and you are connected to the divine intelligence, which is greater, the bigger picture, beyond it all, it's to admit that to yourself and to say it is okay to rise above this person. So when you look oftentimes in generations, oftentimes, we are here in the United States, and we have, we're a country of immigrants. We were founded and built on the passion of immigration to find a better life, to follow your dreams, to be able to live in the life of opportunity and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Life, liberty, and happiness. Let's think about what that means at your core. Are you doing that? Are you on U.S. soil? Are you pursuing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? If you are on international soil, are you pursuing life, liberty, and happiness? Are you navigating to that? Are you drawn to that? Is that what you are seeking, or is that what you're missing? Oftentimes that is the gestalt. That is really that void. That is that empty space where you really need to then plot some action steps to getting to what that means uniquely for you. And it's very difficult to unearth that question and actually to take action, because it contradicts the struggle perhaps that is interwoven in your DNA. And it contradicts that dependency on this person. And it's to say that, I'm going to kind of open up the weave to my existence, and I'm going to allow others to, interact and become incorporated in the fabric of my being. And I'm going to latch arms with them, and they can lift me up. Even if it helps me to be a healthier, stronger, more affluent person than this person, that is okay. The immigration, oftentimes when we see about them, coming in and wanting a better life, that they oftentimes were superseding the previous generation. In other words, they were rising up out of poverty. They were coming into their talent. They were coming into their work ethic. They were coming into connection with others. They were building businesses. They were building brands. They were building prosperity. They were living in ways with which their previous history did not allow them. So they're able to get credit. They're able to have access to resources, building materials, government support, building into new lands, being a pioneer. So it is oftentimes this very thread with which you must find within your own being, the fabric of your being, which gives you that maverick feeling, that pioneer feeling that I'm blazing a new path. We are in the information age. We have access to so much more resources than the previous generation. But it is looking and seeing, oftentimes knowing that generations oftentimes are on a zigzag. In other words, that generation that is rising up out of poverty, the next generation then supersedes. It's oftentimes, studies have shown that the next generation goes down, and then there's a dip up, a dip down, and a dip up. It's very difficult to keep that upward mobility going, especially if the previous generation had attained a degree of wealth. And it's like the 1% of the population which actually does that. So for some reason, there is this pattern in the generations that we see in families. And especially now, it's such an open playing field. There is so much going on in terms of interracial marriages, same-sex relationships, transgender, those people with handicaps that are rising above their handicaps, being just like the passing of Steve Hawkins. Look at the amazing, miraculous story of this gentleman who rose up over his disability. How can you be like Steve Hawkins? How can you rise up over the shackles of your own unique situation? And how can you see the clarity? I mean, think of the ingenuity, the passion, the drive that this gentleman had, and embraced the talent within. He was unequivocally in touch with his life purpose, his life passion, that with which he was stunned by. He's a maverick. I mean, he's able to, they're just now looking at his papers and looking at some of his philosophies and some of his understanding of quantum physics and parallel universes. So he was going really literally where no man or woman had gone before. He was seeing the, the formulas and how they came together, and his study was what was making sense, and he's driving new scientific proofs. So think about that really as exciting and how it patterns in your own life. How can you, like Dr. Stephen Hawking, like those people who have immigrated, who are coming in, venturing into the uncertainty, even those, previous generations who had settled the Great West, who had, embarked on new lands, and they still are, opening up these frontiers. Frontiers now are not only physical, but they are intellectual, they are emotional. There's new frontiers emotionally that people are embarking on and embracing on. How to live your life closer to your passion and truth is really the journey within as well as the journey without. So that fog, it can burn off and lift off, and you can really ramp up once you're able to embrace that and really kind of latch onto what I really promote is latching onto something miraculous that you have seen in life, perhaps that inspires you. To me, inspiration is seeing those others like the Dr. Steve Hawking who have risen up despite all odds. I'm always impressed with those people who, despite all odds, have risen up. I've been very inspired by people in my inner circle whose parents had very difficult emotional challenges. They had mental disorders, bipolar disorders that caused them to want to, really cause harm to themselves, even though they were people of great wealth, great material wealth, great physical beauty, incredible talent, a great humanity for others, working with children, working in the theater, working in, the screenplay, members of their family starring in sitcoms, having sitcoms written about their family because they were so innovative, because they lived such a lavish lifestyle, because they were so, just because of the groundbreaking parties that they would have, the people who they would invite, the big names, just the things that they would do on their weekends. Sitcoms were written about them. So in other words, but there was this propensity to say that this life is not heartfelt. And so there was oftentimes a lot of drinking, drugging, self-sabotaging going on in the parents of this family. And then the children were caused to task to rise up and then parent their parents at a very young age. So I was always very impressed and had great heart for those children who were my friends when we were in our teens, and our young 20s, who had to parent their parents, who had to be there to save their parents, who had to parent them, and had a loss of innocence. But there is this miraculous where you really pull up that I can survive little thread within you. And it was miraculous how they were then able to then follow their own dreams despite or against some very difficult odds. So how can you really look at some heroes in today's society or other society that you have really been inspired by? You can answer this question for yourself. It's very important to be able to calm yourself down and, and really begin to come into a more relaxed or comfortable body and being able to really answer this question truthfully and honestly for yourself. So even though maybe, no one has had this interest in you or asked this question, I am interested in you and I have a heart for you, and I want you to really see that miracle and that hero within yourself and see how heroic you have already been in your life, how inspired and how miracles have actually entered into your life, which have got you thus far, and realize that those miracles are going to continue, those synchronicities are continue, but I want you to invite them in even more so and latch on to greater clarity, and so that you can feel stronger every single day, day in and day out, in knowing that you can pull that inner strength out and latch onto that passion which has been fogged over, which had been toxicity sort of in the air, that tension in the air. If you think of it almost like a running machine which was putting out an exhaust which was not healthy to breathe. You see the people who are breathing through the smog. I mean, just think the harm that has been done to our Mother Earth for the sake of greed, etc. So we're just looking at how organizations which are built on bedrock, which are not based in humane principles, which have been for the greed of the few top of the pyramid and who have exploited the others. So we're seeing the pattern as it exists in your life, but in greater society. So it's to understand that the core problem is at the insensitivity, the psychopathic, those people who don't have an emotional response to the hurt of others. This is a long video. In fact, we're going to go a little bit more in depth than that. I'm reading a wonderful book called The Psychopath Test, which is written by a journalist, John Ronson, and he's talking about his interaction with Dr. Robert Hare, a Canadian psychologist, and how he was really a witness to the creation of the Hare checklist, which is the definitive test for distinguishing those who are psychopathic. And psychopathic, you know, at its core is a lack of empathy, but it's a lack of the startle response. It's a faulty mechanism of the amygdala and the central nervous system. It just does not react at the core of hurting others or where others should be startled. I.e., if you're looking at, you know, pictures of butterflies and beautiful flowers and beautiful sunsets, and all of a sudden, you know, you show a very horrific image, most people would be startled. They would be, you know, horrified. They would feel a little bit of physical pain. It is their amygdala, it is their central nervous system responding with anxiety to that image. You know, in other words, to horror being done, they get a gasp, they get a gape, they get startled. Now, the psychopath does not have that startle response. They don't get startled by horrific things. They don't flinch. They are, in fact, attracted to, or they are really sort of fixated, or they are more, what is the word that I'm looking for? They are more absorbed. They're more interested in it versus startled. So they become intrigued. They become absorbed. They become engaged by it. They do not get startled. So oftentimes, and this is becoming a very long video, but we're talking about the psychopathic, who oftentimes that is how people then were originally attracted to this person, especially if you were a person of perhaps high startle response, high anxiety, or a little bit unsettled, that this person was settling to you because they don't have that startle response. So you were intrigued by them, that they were not thrown off by certain things. So that is really at the core of the problem, because it allows them to exploit and take advantage of a whole mass of people and not feel bad, not feel guilty, not feel that they have done anything wrong, because they literally do not feel that they have done anything wrong, that this is their God-given gift to live in, take, and, you know, amass whatever it is that they want, race cars, huge houses, etc. And so this, you have to understand, is part of the fabric of these individuals and has created the fog. And so it is then it shows you very emphatically how important it is to identify, become aware, and then become full body awareness of your own physicality, full body awareness that you exist as a beautiful, separate, magnificent person outside of this toxic energy, the fog, the pollution, the gunk, the junk, the negativity that weighs heavy, that has darkened your outlook. So it's time for you to follow what brightens up, cheers you up, gets you excited. And you have the privileged position of answering that for yourself. So for example, you know, what do you feel is magnificent? Are you interested in geology? Are you interested in nature? Are you interested in music? What is it that a little baby step that you can find within yourself that is the true you? If I were to say, this is what truly makes you you, what would be the answer to that? What do you really love? What do you adore? What do you have a heart? If you could open your heart just a little bit, What would you open it to? Perhaps even when you were in kindergarten, in first grade, second grade, if you could just peek through those little memories and see what was it that you were really attracted to. What were you really interested in when you were a child kind of blossoming? You can kind of look back and say, if I weren't, subdued by the fog, and if I were to really to pursue and nurture my talents and my interests, that would be for me, in list 1 through 10. And then if I really had the ability to feel energized and calm and free and peaceful, just and calm right now, and if I were to answer on a list of 1 through 10, if I could truly become anything, if that fog were to lift now and a little bit more and in the future, I would really love to become in list 1 through 20. Just write it out, even if it feels very like you're living a fantasy, a rock star, a movie star, a geologist, an ecologist, a star surfer, have a miracle garden outside, a beautiful garden. What is it that you're really intrigued by? Even just a little bit. That can be your go-to list in terms of what you truly are fascinated by. And how can you grow upon that? How can you build upon that? If you're interested in birds, how can you get yourself a bird book? How can you learn about other birders? How can you learn about other magnificent areas of the world where there are a tremendous amount of new types of birds that you can study, or go to a bird shop and then be able to see, pet, and talk to the other people? How can you grow and blow out that area of interest for you, so you can really kind of define yourself now around that versus defining yourself around how manipulated you have been? It's a very different path. What I call it positive orderly direction thinking, where you really begin to follow that on a day-by-day consistent basis. Write it down, get your appointment book, and really begin to write down, even ahead of time, those areas and desires that you want to follow up on. So for example, if it's a place that you want to go, from this list of 1 through 20, plug it into your appointment book. Just begin to write it down. Begin to set it up in your schedule. It's a tool to help reinforce where you want to go, what you want to do. It'll help you to think for you when you can't think for yourself. So your appointment book is what you can really embrace, and it's a tool to help you cognitively, help you to think clearly through the fog that is weighted so heavy. It can be a go-to tool that you can mirror back to you your desires. So write it down, even if it's cooking, for example, and you want to go to a restaurant on your list of 1 through 20. Write down that restaurant that you're going to go to on your day off or your weekend, that you're just write it down now, and then do not let anything stand between you and you pursuing that recovery date.